I'll never forget the way the candlelight flickered across the white tablecloth that Valentine's Day evening, casting shadows that seemed to dance mockingly around my solitary wine glass. I had arrived at Marcello's Italian restaurant 15 minutes early, wearing the red dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion. My heart full of anticipation for a romantic evening with Marcus, my boyfriend of 3 years. The reservation was for 7 o'clock. By 7:20, I was still sitting alone, watching other couples laugh and hold hands across their tables, wondering where he was and trying to ignore the pitying glances from our waiter. When Marcus finally walked through the restaurant door at 7:23, my relief lasted exactly 4 seconds. Because he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, laughing at something he'd just said, touching his arm with casual familiarity, was a woman I'd never met but heard about constantly for the past 8 months. Jessica, his so-called work wife. Marcus spotted me and waved enthusiastically, like bringing another woman to our Valentine's dinner was the most natural thing in the world. They weaved through the tables together, and I watched other diners notice them, probably assuming they were the couple and I was just some friend joining them. The thought made my stomach turn, but I kept my face carefully neutral, that pleasant smile I'd perfected over years of corporate meetings and family gatherings where I had to pretend everything was fine. "Babe, I'm so sorry we're late," Marcus said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. The casualness of it, the audacity, almost made me laugh. Jessica's boyfriend just dumped her this afternoon. Can you believe it? On Valentine's Day of all days. She was devastated, crying in the break room. I couldn't just leave her alone tonight. You understand, right? You're not one of those jealous girlfriends who would make someone spend Valentine's Day alone just because of some arbitrary date night. I looked up at Jessica, who was watching me with carefully arranged sympathy on her face, her hand still resting on Marcus's arm. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women managed, with long dark hair and the kind of figure that came from religious gym attendance. Her dress was black and sophisticated, designer probably, and she wore it with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how good she looked. "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice steady and warm. "That's terrible, Jessica. I'm so sorry about your boyfriend. Please join us." The relief on Marcus's face was almost comical. He'd been expecting a fight, I realized. He'd been prepared for tears or anger or some dramatic scene that would make me look like the unreasonable one. My easy acceptance had thrown him off balance, and I filed that reaction away in my mind, along with everything else I was suddenly noticing with crystalline clarity. They sat down across from me, side by side, leaving me alone on my side of the table like a judge presiding over their romantic dinner. The waiter came by with menus, and Marcus immediately started discussing wine options with Jessica, debating between a Cabernet and a Pinot Noir without once asking my preference. They settled on the Cabernet. I hated Cabernet. Marcus knew I hated Cabernet. We'd had this exact conversation dozens of times over 3 years together. "We'll start with the Cabernet," Marcus told the waiter confidently, "and the burrata appetizer. Jessica and I are obsessed with their burrata." Jessica and I. The words hit me like tiny daggers, each one precisely placed. I watched them study their menus, heads bent close together, Jessica pointing out dishes while Marcus nodded enthusiastically. They looked like a couple. They acted like a couple. And I was the third wheel at my own Valentine's dinner. "The carbonara here is incredible," Marcus said to Jessica. "Remember when we tried to make it at the office potluck? Ours was terrible compared to this." Jessica laughed, that bright, tinkling laugh that seemed designed to attract attention. "Oh my God, yes. We used way too much pepper. Everyone was too polite to tell us it was inedible. Again, our carbonara, our failed cooking attempt, our inside joke that I knew nothing about." I sipped my water and watched them, really watched them, cataloging every touch, every shared glance, every we and us and our that excluded me from the relationship I thought I was part of. The appetizer arrived, and they shared it off the same plate, Marcus's fork occasionally meeting Jessica's in the middle, both of them laughing when it happened. The waiter returned for our dinner order, and Marcus ordered the sea base for himself without looking at the menu. He knew this restaurant well. How many times had he been here without me? Jessica loves the carbonara, Marcus said. She'll have that. Babe, what do you want? Babe. He called me babe like an afterthought, like remembering I existed was an effort he had to consciously make. I ordered the first thing I saw on the menu, not tasting anything anyway, my mind too busy processing the reality unfolding in front of me. Their conversation flowed like water, easy and natural, full of references to people I didn't know and situations I wasn't part of. Remember when Henderson almost walked out of the meeting? That time Davidson spilled coffee all over the presentation? When we had to pull that all-nighter for the Miller account? Every story was we. Every memory was shared. Every laugh was synchronized like they'd been practicing together for months, which I realized with sudden clarity they had been. I thought about all the nights Marcus had come home late, smelling like expensive restaurants, claiming he'd been working. All the weekends he'd suddenly needed to go into the office, returning home hours later with elaborate stories about technical difficulties and server crashes. All the times his phone had buzzed with messages he'd quickly dismissed, claiming it was just work stuff, nothing important. Jessica touched his arm again, letting her hand linger, and Marcus didn't pull away. He leaned into it, actually leaned into her touch while I sat 3 feet away, invisible. They were so comfortable together, so natural, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. And maybe they had. Maybe I was the only one who didn't know that my relationship had become a triangle months ago. The dinner progressed in a haze of shared plates and inside jokes and casual touches that shouldn't have been happening between coworkers. Jessica fed Marcus a bite of her carbonara. Marcus wiped a bit of sauce from the corner of her mouth with his napkin. They shared a tiramisu for dessert, 2 forks, 1 plate, feeding each other bites while I sat with my own untouched dessert, feeling like I was watching a romantic movie about someone else's life. Marcus, remember that conference in Miami? Jessica said, her eyes bright with the memory. That was the best night. I'll never forget watching the sunrise from the beach. Marcus's face flushed, and for just a moment, he looked uncomfortable. Yeah, that was a good conference. Really productive meetings. The meetings were fine, Jessica said, laughing. But the after-hours were incredible. That little bar we found, the one with the live music. We danced until 3 in the morning. My hands gripped my napkin under the table. Miami. Marcus had gone to a conference in Miami 6 months ago. He told me it was boring, nothing but meetings and hotel rooms, that he'd barely left the convention center. He called me every night, complained about how much he missed me, said he couldn't wait to get home. And apparently he'd been dancing with Jessica until 3 in the morning. That sounds nice, I said, my voice still calm, still pleasant. Marcus told me that conference was all work. Jessica laughed again. Oh, it was definitely all work during the day. But you know what they say, all work and no play. We needed to blow off some steam. We needed to blow off steam. Together. 3 in the morning. On a beach. Watching the sunrise. The waiter brought the check, and Marcus pulled out his credit card without looking at the total. The same credit card that was linked to our joint account, the account we'd opened 2 years ago when we'd moved in together, the account that was supposed to be for shared expenses. He was paying for Jessica's expensive carbonara and half the Cabernet and her portion of the tiramisu with our money, and he didn't even seem to realize the problem with that. Or maybe he just didn't care. We left the restaurant together, Marcus helping Jessica with her coat, holding the door for her, walking with his hand hovering near the small of her back. I followed behind them, watching them move together like synchronized dancers, and something inside me shifted, something fundamental and irreversible. The old Sarah, the one who had walked into that restaurant 2 hours ago, expecting a romantic Valentine's dinner, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone harder, someone who was done being invisible in her own relationship. The drive home was silent. Marcus drove. Jessica sat in the passenger seat because Marcus had insisted, "You've had a rough day." And I sat in the back like a child being driven home from school. They chatted quietly about work stuff, about people I didn't know and projects I wasn't involved in, and I stared out the window and started planning. When we finally dropped Jessica at her apartment building, she leaned over and hugged Marcus goodbye, holding on just a bit too long, and I watched his hand rest on her back, familiar and comfortable. "Thanks for tonight," she said softly. You're the best. Both of you, she added, like remembering I existed required conscious effort. Any time, Marcus said warmly. Call me if you need anything. Seriously, anything. We drove the remaining 15 minutes to our apartment in complete silence. Marcus kept glancing at me like he was waiting for something, probably for me to explode, to yell, to demand to know what the hell that dinner had been about. But I didn't. I just smiled serenely and stared out the window and let the silence stretch between us like a vast, uncrossable distance. You're being weird, Marcus finally said as we pulled into our parking spot. Jessica needed us tonight. Her boyfriend dumped her on Valentine's Day. That's cruel. We did a good thing. You're right, I said, still smiling. I'm glad we could help her. Marcus looked confused, suspicious even, like my agreement was some kind of trap. Really? You're not mad. Why would I be mad? I asked, gathering my purse and opening my door. You're just being a good friend to someone who needed support. That's admirable. I walked into our building, into the elevator, into our apartment, still smiling, still calm, while Marcus followed me looking increasingly unsettled by my lack of reaction. He wanted a fight. He'd been prepared for accusations and tears and jealous ranting. My perfect composure was throwing him off balance, and I was glad. Let him be unsettled. Let him wonder what I was thinking. Because what I was thinking was dangerous. What I was thinking was calculating and cold and absolutely certain. What I was thinking was that I just spent 3 hours watching my boyfriend fall all over another woman, using our money to pay for her dinner, making plans with we and us while I sat ignored and invisible, and that I was done being the understanding girlfriend who smiled through her own humiliation. What I was thinking was that if Marcus wanted to play games, I was about to show him I could play too. But I would play better, smarter, and I would win. That night, I lay in bed next to Marcus, who fell asleep within minutes, apparently unbothered by the evening's events, apparently convinced that my easy acceptance meant everything was fine. I stared at the ceiling and listened to him breathe and thought about Miami and 3 in the morning and sunrise on the beach and dancing until dawn. I thought about we and us and our carbonara and inside jokes I wasn't part of. I thought about 8 months of hearing about Jessica, this wonderful coworker who understood Marcus's work stress and shared his professional ambitions and made him laugh during long meetings. 8 months. That's when Jessica had started at Marcus's company. That's when the late nights and weekend work sessions had begun. That's when Marcus had suddenly needed to go to more conferences and client dinners and team-building events. 8 months of Jessica slowly inserting herself into Marcus's life, into our life. And I'd been too trusting, too understanding, too secure in our 3-year relationship to see what was happening right in front of me. But I saw it now, crystal clear, undeniable. The next morning, Marcus left for work early, kissing me goodbye and saying something about a breakfast meeting. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the parking lot. Then I got up and went straight to his home office. His laptop was still on the desk where he'd left it the night before, screen dark but not shut down. I touched the trackpad, and it sprang to life, no password required because Marcus trusted me. Marcus thought I would never snoop, never question, never doubt him. Marcus was wrong. His email was open, and there in his inbox was a message from Jessica sent at 11:30 the previous night, after we dropped her off. The subject line was "Thank you," and I clicked it with a strange sense of calm detachment, like I was reading someone else's story, not my own life falling apart. "Thank you for tonight," the email read. "I know bringing me along was risky, but it was so worth it to spend more time with you. Sarah seems really nice and understanding. You're lucky to have someone so chill. Can't wait for our next adventure. Miss you already. Miss you already." They'd seen each other 3 hours ago, and she already missed him. I scrolled down and found the email chain between them, months and months of messages going back to Jessica's first week at the company. Friendly at first, professional, then gradually shifting into something else entirely. Compliments about appearances. Jokes about boring meetings. Plans to grab coffee, then lunch, then dinner. References to inside jokes and shared experiences. And then, about 4 months ago, the tone changed completely. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive in ways I haven't felt in years." She doesn't understand you like I do. When can I see you again? I felt like I was falling, like the ground had opened up beneath me and I was plummeting through space. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop across the room like I wanted to. Instead, I opened a new folder on my phone, titled it Evidence, and started taking screenshots. Every flirty email, every suggestive message, every time they made plans to meet up while Marcus told me he was working late or going to the gym or running errands. 47 emails in the past month alone. 47 times Marcus had written to Jessica, sometimes multiple messages in a single day, constant communication that I'd known nothing about. I scrolled through them systematically, documenting everything, my hands steady even as my world crumbled around me. Then I found the photos, attached to an email from 2 months ago with the subject line, "Best weekend ever." I opened the attachment and saw Marcus and Jessica at a hotel pool, both in swimsuits, both clearly drunk based on their flushed faces and bright eyes. They were wearing matching white hotel robes, holding tropical drinks, looking at the camera with the kind of intimacy that couldn't be faked. Jessica was practically draped across Marcus's lap, his arm around her waist, both of them grinning like idiots. Miami, the boring conference that was all meetings and hotel rooms. The weekend Marcus had called me every night complaining about how much he missed me. The trip he'd said he couldn't wait to come home from. I took screenshots of the photos, saved them to my evidence folder, and kept digging. The more I found, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just an emotional affair, wasn't just flirty coworkers crossing boundaries. Marcus and Jessica had been conducting a full-blown relationship for at least 6 months, maybe longer. They'd been to conferences together, dinners together, apparently spent entire weekends together while I sat at home believing his lies. I moved on to our joint credit card statements, the ones I could access through our shared bank account. I'd always trusted Marcus to manage the finances, had never felt the need to check every charge, had assumed we were on the same page about money. Now I started going through the statements line by line, and I found charges that made my blood run cold. Hotel rooms in Miami. Expensive dinners at romantic restaurants I'd never been to. 2 tickets to a concert for a band I'd never heard Marcus mention. A jewelry purchase from Tiffany's for $800. I'd never received any jewelry from Tiffany's. I scrolled back through months of statements, highlighting suspicious charges, adding them up in my head. Over $7,000 in the past 6 months alone, money from our joint account, money I'd contributed to, spent on his affair with Jessica. I transferred the statements to my evidence folder, organized everything by date, created a timeline of their relationship based on emails and charges and the patterns I was seeing. Tuesday nights, charges at restaurants near Jessica's apartment. Thursday nights, the same pattern. Weekend mornings, coffee shops I'd never been to. It was all there, a complete map of Marcus's double life, and he'd been so confident I would never look, so certain of my blind trust, that he hadn't even tried to hide it well. By noon, I had documented everything I could find on his laptop. I forwarded key emails to my personal account, downloaded photos to my phone, created copies of credit card statements. Then I carefully closed all the windows, left everything exactly as I'd found it, and went to take a shower. I stood under the hot water and felt the enormity of what I'd discovered wash over me. But still, I didn't cry. There would be time for tears later, maybe. Right now, I needed to be strategic. I called my best friend Emma from the shower, speaking quietly even though I was alone in the apartment. I need your help. Marcus is cheating on me." There was a long pause. "What? Are you sure?" "I'm positive. I have proof. Months of proof. But I need to be smart about how I handle this. Can you come over later? I need someone I trust." "I'm coming over right now," Emma said immediately. "Don't do anything until I get there. Don't confront him, don't let him know you know. Just wait for me." Emma arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and donuts and the kind of fierce loyalty that made me grateful I'd kept at least one relationship healthy and honest. I showed her everything, every email and photo and credit card charge, and watched her face go from shock to anger to cold determination. "That absolute bastard," she said finally. "And Valentine's dinner? He brought her to your Valentine's dinner. As his good deed for the day." I said bitterly. Helping a lonely coworker through a tough time. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy them both, I said calmly. But I need to be smart about it. Emotional reactions won't work. I need evidence, strategy, perfect timing. Emma nodded slowly. You need a lawyer. I need more than a lawyer. I need to know everything. Who Jessica really is, what her pattern is, whether Marcus is just another mark for her or if this is real. I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with before I make my move. Emma pulled out her phone. I know someone who can help. My friend's sister is a private investigator. She specializes in this kind of thing. Infidelity, background checks, digital forensics. Let me call her. While Emma made arrangements, I sat on my couch in the apartment I'd chosen, that I'd decorated, that I'd made into a home for Marcus and me, and I felt something inside me harden into steel. The old Sarah would have confronted Marcus immediately, would have cried and demanded explanations and probably believed whatever lies he told her. The old Sarah would have blamed herself, wondered what she'd done wrong, tried to figure out how to fix it. But the old Sarah was gone, replaced by someone who understood that this wasn't about what she'd done wrong. This was about Marcus being a liar and a cheat, about Jessica being a homewrecker, about two people who'd decided their desires mattered more than my feelings or our relationship or basic human decency. And the new Sarah wasn't going to cry about it. The new Sarah was going to make sure they both regretted ever thinking they could get away with this. Emma's private investigator friend, a woman named Lauren with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, agreed to meet with us that afternoon. I showed her everything I'd found, and she nodded approvingly at my documentation. You've done good work here. This is exactly the kind of evidence that holds up. Now let me dig deeper and see what else we can find. How long will it take? I asked. For a basic background check and surveillance? Maybe a week. I'll look into Jessica's history, see if there are any patterns, find out if your boyfriend is her first married target or if she's done this before. I'll also track their movements, confirm what's happening, get photographic evidence if needed. And Marcus? Can you look into his background too? See if there's anything else I should know about. Lauren smiled grimly. Honey, if your boyfriend is stupid enough to conduct an 8-month affair without hiding it better, chances are he's stupid about other things too. Let me see what I can find. Over the next week, I maintained perfect normalcy with Marcus. I smiled when he came home late. I accepted his explanations about work stress and difficult clients. I listened to his stories about office drama, including stories about Jessica and how she was struggling after her breakup, how Marcus was trying to be supportive, how grateful she was for his friendship. I nodded and made sympathetic noises and played the role of the understanding girlfriend while secretly meeting with Lauren to review her findings. And what Lauren found was illuminating. Jessica Richardson, 26 years old, had worked at 3 different companies in the past 4 years. At each company, she'd been involved with a man in a relationship. At her first job, she dated a married senior analyst for 6 months before his wife found out and he chose his marriage. Jessica had quit shortly after. At her second job, she'd had an affair with a man who'd been engaged. The engagement had ended, they'd dated for 3 months. Then Jessica had moved on to someone else and eventually left the company amid rumors and scandal. At her third job, the pattern had repeated with a manager who'd been living with his girlfriend of 5 years. She's a serial other woman, Lauren said, showing me the documentation she'd gathered. She gets hired, identifies a successful man in a relationship, pursues him until she succeeds, then either gets bored or gets caught and moves on. Your boyfriend is her 4th target that I can confirm, and probably not her last. What about the boyfriend she supposedly just broke up with? I asked. The one Marcus felt so sorry for on Valentine's Day? Lauren pulled out more documents. Derek Patterson dated Jessica for 8 months. He dumped her 3 months ago when he found texts between her and Marcus on her phone. He tried to warn your boyfriend actually, reached out through mutual connections, but Jessica convinced Marcus that Derek was crazy and jealous and making things up. I felt a spark of something like hope. Derek knows about the affair? He has evidence. He has screenshots of their early texts, back when Jessica was still with him and starting things with Marcus. He'd probably be willing to share them if it meant exposing Jessica for what she is. Can you set up a meeting? I met Derek Patterson 3 days later at a coffee shop across town. Somewhere Marcus would never go. Somewhere we could talk privately. Derek was 32, attractive in a quiet way, and he had the look of someone who'd been burned badly and hadn't quite recovered. When I sat down across from him and introduced myself, his expression shifted from curiosity to sympathy to anger. "You're Sarah," he said. "Marcus's girlfriend. Jessica showed me pictures of you once, back when we were together. She said you were so sweet and trusting, that Marcus was lucky to have someone so understanding." The irony of that statement, given what Jessica had been doing behind both our backs, almost made me laugh. "I'm guessing understanding is code for naive and easily fooled." Derek smiled bitterly. "That's how she operates. She identifies women she thinks won't fight back, won't cause drama, won't make waves. Then she systematically takes their partners while making herself look like the victim or the friend or the person just trying to help." "Tell me everything," I said. "I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Derek told me about meeting Jessica at a friend's party, how charming and funny she'd been, how quickly their relationship had progressed. Then, about 6 months in, she'd started working at Marcus's company and coming home with stories about this amazing coworker who was so smart and ambitious and stuck in a boring relationship with someone who didn't appreciate him. Derek had thought nothing of it at first. Jessica was friendly, enthusiastic about new people. It was just her way. "Then I noticed she was texting constantly," Derek said. "During dinners, during movies, during sex. Always on her phone. Always smiling at whatever message she'd just received. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say it was work stuff, nothing important, but she'd never let me see her screen." "When did you find out about Marcus?" 2 months after she started at his company. I borrowed her phone to look up a restaurant address because mine was dead, and I saw a text notification from someone named M. The preview said, "Can't wait to see you tonight. She'll never know." I opened the message thread and found months of texts between Jessica and someone she called her work husband. Flirty texts, sexual texts, texts about how boring and basic his girlfriend was, how Jessica was everything he'd been missing. I felt sick hearing my relationship described that way, reduced to complaints and comparisons by two people who decided I was less than them somehow. "What did you do?" I confronted her. She cried, said it was just emotional support, that Marcus was going through a rough patch and she was being a friend. She swore nothing physical had happened, that it was all just talking and venting. She said she loved me, that Marcus meant nothing, that she'd stop talking to him immediately. But she didn't stop. She got better at hiding it, changed his name in her phone, deleted messages more frequently, met him places she knew I wouldn't be. I tried to trust her, tried to believe her promises, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying. So I started paying attention, really paying attention, and I saw the patterns. Late nights at work that never seemed to produce any actual work. Weekend emergencies that required her to go into the office. Business trips where she'd come back glowing and happy and smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. "When did you finally end it?" "When I found photos on her laptop. Jessica and Marcus at a hotel pool in Miami, looking at the camera like they were on their honeymoon. I recognized the look in her eyes because that's how she used to look at me, back when we first started dating and everything was new and exciting. That's when I realized I'd already lost her. Probably lost her the day she met Marcus. I was just the placeholder she kept around until she was sure Marcus would leave you." We sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd been betrayed by the same woman, who'd been lied to and manipulated and discarded when someone more interesting came along. Then Derek reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. "I saved everything," he said, sliding the folder across the table. Screenshots of their texts, dates, and times of when Jessica lied about where she was. Receipts from restaurants and hotels that proved she was with Marcus when she told me she was somewhere else. I was going to use it to warn Marcus's girlfriend. Warn you? But I couldn't figure out how to contact you without seeming like a crazy ex-boyfriend with an agenda. I opened the folder and found meticulous documentation of Jessica's affair with Marcus. Evidence that corroborated everything I'd already discovered and filled in gaps I hadn't known existed. Derek had been thorough, almost obsessive, and I understood why. When someone lies to you that completely, you need proof. You need evidence that you're not crazy, that your suspicions were valid, that the person you loved really was as terrible as they seemed. "Thank you for this," I said sincerely. "This helps more than you know." "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm going to make sure both of them face consequences for what they've done. Not just to me and you, but to everyone else Jessica's hurt over the years, and everyone else Marcus might hurt in the future." Derek studied me for a long moment. "You're not going to just dump him and move on, are you?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm going to destroy them both. And I could use your help." We spent the next 2 hours developing a plan. Derek knew Jessica's weaknesses, her fears, her patterns. I knew Marcus's vulnerabilities, his pride, his overconfidence. Together, we created a strategy that would expose them both in the most devastating way possible, timing everything perfectly to maximize the damage and minimize the chance that they'd see it coming. "When do you want to do this?" Derek asked as we were leaving the coffee shop. "Soon," I said. "I'm tired of pretending everything's fine. I'm tired of watching Marcus come home and lie to my face. I'm tired of Jessica texting me with her fake concern, asking how I'm doing, pretending she's my friend while she's sleeping with my boyfriend." "Jessica's been texting you?" I showed him my phone, the messages from Jessica that had started after Valentine's dinner. Messages asking if I was okay, if Marcus and I were fighting, if I needed someone to talk to. Messages that seemed supportive on the surface but were really just fishing for information, trying to figure out if I suspected anything, if Marcus's cover story was holding up. "She's good," Derek said admiringly, "in the way you might admire a particularly skilled con artist. She always knows exactly what to say to make herself look innocent." "Not for much longer," I promised. I went home that evening with Derek's folder, with Lauren's investigation reports, with my own documentation, and I compiled everything into one comprehensive file. 8 months of lies, thousands of dollars in charges, dozens of hotel visits and restaurant dinners and secret meetings. I had emails and texts and photos and witness statements. I had timelines and evidence and proof of every lie Marcus had told me. Now I just needed the perfect moment to use it all. That moment came 2 weeks later when Marcus mentioned casually over breakfast that he wanted to have Jessica over for dinner at our apartment. "She's been so depressed since her breakup," he said, not looking at me, focused on his phone as always. "I think it would help her to see a happy relationship, to know that good partnerships exist. Maybe we could cook for her, show her what a healthy dynamic looks like." The absolute audacity of this statement, the breathtaking arrogance it took for Marcus to suggest bringing his mistress into our home and presenting our relationship as some kind of model while he was actively destroying it, almost made me laugh out loud. Instead, I smiled warmly. "That's a wonderful idea," I said. "Jessica's become so important to you. I'd love to get to know her better." Marcus looked surprised, then pleased. "Really? You're okay with it?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I be? I don't know, I just thought." "Never mind. Thank you, babe. This means a lot to me." It would mean a lot to him indeed, just not in the way he expected. We set the dinner for the following Friday night, and I spent the week preparing. Not just preparing food, but preparing evidence, preparing my presentation, preparing for the confrontation that would end my relationship and, if I played my cards right, end Marcus's and Jessica's careers at the same time. I called Emma and Derek and filled them in on the plan. Emma would arrive at 8:30, claiming to just drop by, providing moral support and a witness to whatever went down. Derek would stay on standby, ready to come over if needed, ready to present his own evidence if Jessica tried to deny anything. Lauren had provided me with a digital recorder disguised as a pen, which I would use to capture everything that was said. No more he said, she said. No more gaslighting or rewriting history. Everything would be documented, recorded, undeniable. Friday evening arrived, and I cooked an elaborate Italian meal, setting the table with our good dishes, lighting candles, making everything perfect. When Marcus came home from work, he found me in the kitchen, apron on, hair perfectly styled, looking every bit the domestic goddess. He kissed my cheek, told me I was amazing, said Jessica was going to love this. Jessica was definitely going to remember this. She arrived at 7, dressed casually but expensively, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my dress. She hugged Marcus first, a long, lingering embrace that spoke of intimacy and familiarity, then turned to me with that bright, fake smile I'd come to recognize. "Sarah, this is so sweet of you to have me over. You have such a beautiful home." Our home. The home I'd furnished, that I'd decorated, that I'd made warm and welcoming while Marcus worked late, which apparently meant spending time with Jessica. But I smiled back just as brightly. "Thank you. I'm so glad you could make it. Marcus talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you." We settled at the table, and I served the first course while watching them interact. The casual touches, the shared glances, the way they leaned toward each other like magnets drawn together. Marcus poured wine for all of us, but he filled Jessica's glass first, attending to her needs before mine, before his own. Such a small thing, but so telling. Over dinner, they fell into their familiar pattern of inside jokes and work stories, occasionally remembering to include me with explanations that were clearly afterthoughts. I played my role perfectly, the pleasant hostess asking interested questions, laughing at appropriate moments, never letting my mask slip to show the cold fury building underneath. "So Jessica," I said as we finished the main course, "Marcus mentioned you just went through a breakup. That must be so hard." Jessica's face arranged itself into an expression of artful sadness. "It was definitely difficult. Derek and I were together for 8 months, but we wanted different things. He was very—" She paused, searching for the word, "possessive, jealous of my friendships, especially my friendship with Marcus. It got exhausting constantly defending my right to have male friends." I nodded sympathetically. "That does sound exhausting. Jealousy can really poison a relationship." "Exactly," Jessica said, brightening. "That's why I'm so grateful for your understanding. Some women would be uncomfortable with how close Marcus and I are, but you get it. You trust him." "I trust him completely," I said, and it wasn't even a lie. I trusted Marcus to be exactly who he'd shown himself to be, a liar and a cheat who thought he was smarter than everyone around him. Marcus beamed at me clearly, thrilled that his girlfriend and his mistress were getting along so well. "See, Jess? I told you Sarah was amazing. She's not like other women. She's secure, confident, not threatened by our friendship." "You're very lucky," Jessica said to Marcus, but she was looking at me with something that might have been pity or contempt or both. "Not many women would be this understanding." "Well," I said, standing to clear the dinner plates, "I believe in giving people enough rope to hang themselves. Everyone makes their own choices, and eventually those choices have consequences." There was a moment of silence, a flicker of confusion crossing both their faces, like they'd heard something in my tone that didn't quite match my words. But then I smiled again, and the moment passed, and they went back to their comfortable bubble of mutual admiration and secret touches. I served dessert, a tiramisu I'd made from scratch, and watched them share it off one plate with 2 forks, their movements synchronized like a dance they'd practiced 1,000 times. When Jessica fed Marcus a bite, letting her finger linger at the corner of his mouth, I knew it was time. "You know what's funny?" I said conversationally, setting down my own fork. "I've been thinking a lot about Miami lately." Marcus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Miami? That conference you went to 6 months ago. The one you said was so boring, just meetings and hotel rooms. I was remembering how you called me every night, complaining about how much you missed me, how you couldn't wait to get home." Jessica had gone very still, her eyes darting between Marcus and me, trying to figure out where this was going. "It was boring," Marcus said carefully. "Why are you bringing this up?" "Because I saw the photos," I said simply. "The ones you and Jessica took at the hotel pool. You both looked like you were having a great time. The tropical drinks, the matching robes, the way Jessica was sitting in your lap. That didn't look boring at all." The color drained from Marcus's face. Jessica set down her fork very carefully, like she was handling explosives. The air in the room had changed, charged with electricity, dangerous. "Sarah," Marcus started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not done." I've also been looking at our credit card statements. So many interesting charges over the past few months. Hotels, expensive dinners, concert tickets. I never went to any concerts with you, Marcus. I never stayed at any of these hotels. But Jessica did, didn't she? Jessica stood up abruptly. I think I should go. Sit down, I said, and my voice had steel in it that made her freeze. We're not done here. In fact, we're just getting started. I pulled out my laptop from where I'd hidden it on the credenza and opened it, turning the screen so they could both see. Then I started playing a slideshow. Emails between Marcus and Jessica. Their flirtation obvious and undeniable. Credit card statements with charges highlighted in red. Photos from Miami and other trips and restaurants and hotels. Text messages from Derek's phone showing Jessica's affair starting while she was still in a relationship. A complete, comprehensive, undeniable record of everything they'd done. This is insane, Jessica said, but her voice shook. You went through his private emails? That's a violation of privacy. His laptop was open, I said calmly, and we share a credit card account, which means I have every right to review the charges. Everything I found legally, ethically, and thoroughly. Marcus was staring at the screen like he was watching his life implode in real time, which he was. Sarah, I can explain. Please don't, I said. I don't want to hear more lies. I've heard enough lies to last me a lifetime. What I want is for you to understand that I know everything. Every lie you told me, every dollar you spent on her, every moment you were with her while telling me you were somewhere else. I know all of it, and I've documented all of it, and there's nothing you can say that will change the facts. It's not what it looks like, Jessica tried, falling back on the oldest, most tired excuse in the cheater's handbook. I turned to her with a smile that had no warmth in it. Really, Jessica? Then please explain what it looks like. Explain the emails where you call me boring and basic. Explain the texts where you talk about how Marcus is going to leave me soon. Explain the hotel photos and the romantic dinners and the fact that you've been conducting an affair with my boyfriend for 8 months while pretending to be his friend and texting me with fake concern. Jessica's mask finally cracked, and underneath it was something cold and calculating. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, Marcus and I have been together. We're in love. We have been for months. But this wasn't some calculated seduction. It just happened. We connected in a way that he clearly doesn't connect with you. Connected, I repeated. Is that what you call systematically destroying someone's relationship? Because I've done my research on you, Jessica. I know about your ex-boyfriend Derek, how you cheated on him with Marcus. I know about the 3 jobs before this one, where you had affairs with men in relationships at every single company. I know your pattern. You find successful men who are taken. You pursue them until they're stupid enough to think with something other than their brain. Then you get bored and move on to the next conquest. Jessica's face had gone white. That's not true. I have documentation from Derek proving it's true. I have employment records showing your pattern of moving companies after relationship scandals. I have witnesses who will testify about your history. Face it, Jessica, you're not special. You're not the love of Marcus's life. You're just the latest in a long line of men you've manipulated and discarded. The doorbell rang, interrupting the confrontation. I'd been expecting it, had timed everything perfectly. I went to answer it, and there was Emma right on schedule with Derek standing beside her. Sorry to interrupt, Emma said, walking in like she owned the place, which in spirit she kind of did after years of friendship. But I thought you might need backup. Jessica saw Derek and actually gasped, backing up like he was dangerous. What is he doing here? Hello, Jessica, Derek said calmly, walking into the apartment. Been a while. How's that happy relationship with Marcus working out? Marcus looked between Derek and Jessica, confusion and dawning horror crossing his face. Who is this? This is Derek, I said pleasantly. Jessica's ex-boyfriend. The one she was cheating on with you. The one who tried to warn you months ago that Jessica was using you. But she convinced you he was crazy and jealous. Turns out he was just honest. Derek pulled out his phone and started showing Marcus screenshots of texts between himself and Jessica. Texts that made it clear she'd been with Derek while pursuing Marcus. that she'd lied to both of them, that she'd been playing them against each other for months. Marcus read the texts with the expression of someone watching their entire worldview crumble. "You told me he was crazy," Marcus said to Jessica, his voice hollow. "You said he was making things up, that he couldn't handle you being friends with another man." "He was jealous," Jessica said desperately. "He's still jealous. That's why he's here, to ruin this for us." "There is no us," Derek said flatly. "There never was. You were using me until you found someone better, and you're using Marcus now until you find your next target. That's what you do, Jessica. That's who you are." Jessica looked around the room, surrounded by people who knew the truth about her carefully constructed persona in shambles. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered Valentine's dinner, remembered her hand on Marcus's arm, remembered her fake texts asking if I was okay while she was sleeping with my boyfriend, and the sympathy evaporated. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said to Marcus, who was still staring at the evidence of Jessica's betrayal like he couldn't quite process it. "You threw away a 3-year relationship for someone who never actually cared about you. You lied to me, spent our money on her, humiliated me at Valentine's dinner, all for someone who was just using you as entertainment until she got bored." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I really thought she loved me." "She doesn't love anyone but herself," Derek said. "Trust me, I learned that the hard way." Jessica finally found her voice again, and when she spoke, the sweetness was completely gone, replaced by something sharp and ugly. "Fine. You all want to judge me? Go ahead." But Marcus came willingly. He pursued me just as much as I pursued him. He complained about Sarah constantly, about how boring their relationship had become, how he felt trapped. I didn't force him to do anything. He wanted out. I turned to Marcus. "Is that true? Did you want out of our relationship?" Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Things had gotten routine. I felt like we were more roommates than partners. But I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. You never meant to get caught," I corrected. "There's a difference. If you'd wanted to end our relationship, you could have broken up with me like an adult. Instead, you chose to lie and cheat and spend months building a secret life while pretending everything was fine. That was a choice, Marcus. You don't get to blame that on our relationship being routine or Jessica being exciting. You chose this." "What do you want me to say?" Marcus asked, and he sounded exhausted, defeated. "That I'm sorry? That I made a mistake? That I wish I could take it all back?" "I want you to take responsibility," I said. "I want you to stop making excuses. And I want you to pack your things and get out of my apartment." "Our apartment," Marcus corrected automatically. "My apartment," I said firmly. "My name is on the lease. I paid the entire deposit, $8,000 from my savings. I have the bank records to prove it. You've been living in my apartment, eating food I bought, sleeping in a bed I furnished, all while conducting an affair with her." I pulled out an envelope from the credenza drawer and handed it to Marcus. "Notice to vacate. My lawyer prepared it. You have 30 days legally, but I'm giving you 2 hours to pack your essential items. Everything else we'll sort out later with lawyers present." Marcus stared at the envelope like it might explode. "You can't just kick me out." "Actually, she can," Emma said. "I'm a paralegal, Marcus. That notice is completely legal. You can fight it in court if you want, but given the evidence she has of your affair and misuse of shared funds, I wouldn't recommend it." I handed Marcus a second envelope. Itemized list of shared belongings. Everything I paid for is highlighted in yellow. Everything we purchased together is highlighted in blue. Everything you paid for yourself is highlighted in pink. Take the pink items tonight. We'll discuss the blue items later. Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. The yellow section was 3 pages long. The blue section was half a page. The pink section was maybe 3 items. His face went through several expressions as he realized just how much of our shared life had been funded by me, by my salary and my inheritance and my contributions to our joint account that he'd been spending on Jessica. "This can't be right," he said weakly. "It's completely right. I have receipts for everything. My lawyer has copies. If you'd like to dispute any of it, we can do that through the legal system. Jessica had been slowly edging toward the door during this exchange, clearly hoping to escape before the spotlight turned back to her. But I wasn't done with her yet. Jessica, I said, and she froze. One more thing before you go. I handed her a third envelope, this one thicker than the others. Screenshots of all your texts and emails with Marcus. Every flirty message, every plan to meet up, every complaint about me, every time you used company resources to conduct your personal relationship. Jessica's eyes widened in panic. What are you going to do with these? I've already sent them to your HR department. This morning, actually. They're probably reviewing them right now, trying to decide if your relationship with Marcus violates the company's fraternization policy. I'm guessing it does, since you both tried so hard to hide it. You had no right, Jessica started, but I cut her off. I had every right to inform your employer that 2 of their employees were conducting an inappropriate relationship that might affect their work performance and judgment. Whether they choose to do anything about it is up to them. Marcus had gone pale again. You sent our messages to HR? My HR. Your HR and Jessica's HR, yes. I was very thorough. I also mentioned the company credit card you've been using for personal expenses. Marcus, those dinners with Jessica, the ones you expensed as client entertainment, those were fraud. And fraud is a terminable offense, possibly even a criminal one depending on how much money we're talking about. How much money is it? Emma asked curiously. I pulled out yet another document from my apparently endless supply of evidence. Based on the expense reports I was able to access, approximately $2,800 in fraudulent claims over 6 months. Claiming personal dinners with Jessica were business meetings with clients, charging couples massages as team-building activities, expensing a weekend trip to wine country as a professional development conference. Marcus looked like he might be sick. They're going to fire me. Probably, I agreed. But that's the least of your problems. If they decide to press charges for the fraud, you could be facing actual legal consequences. I'm not a lawyer, but my lawyer seems to think they'll want to make an example of you to discourage other employees from trying the same thing. Why are you doing this? Marcus asked, and he actually sounded confused, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I might be angry about his affair and lies and theft. Because actions have consequences, I said simply. Because you spent 8 months lying to me, humiliating me, spending my money on another woman, and you thought you'd get away with it. Because you brought your mistress to our Valentine's dinner and made me sit there while you ignored me and fawned over her. Because you thought I was too nice, too understanding, too naive to ever figure out what you were doing. And I'm done being that person, Marcus. I'm done being the woman who smiles through her own humiliation. So this is revenge, Jessica spat. This whole thing, the dinner, the confrontation, ruining our careers. This is just revenge. No, I said calmly. Revenge would be irrational and emotional. This is justice. This is making sure that you both face appropriate consequences for your choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie and cheat and manipulate. You chose to violate company policies and commit expense fraud. Those were your choices, and now you get to deal with the results of those choices. The fight seemed to drain out of both of them. Jessica grabbed her purse and headed for the door without another word. Derek followed her out, calling back, "Good luck, Sarah. You deserve better than this." Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, holding his notice to vacate and looking lost. "I really am sorry," he said quietly. "I know you won't believe me, but I am." "I believe you're sorry you got caught," I said. "I believe you're sorry you're losing your job and your apartment and your comfortable life. But I don't believe you're actually sorry for what you did to me. If you were, you would have stopped months ago. You would have broken up with me before starting something with Jessica. You would have had the basic decency to end one relationship before beginning another." "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "What? When did you know? When did you figure it out?" I thought about Valentine's dinner, about sitting alone at that table watching him walk in with Jessica, about the moment I decided to stop being the understanding girlfriend and start being someone who fought back. "I've suspected for months," I said honestly. But I knew for certain the morning after Valentine's dinner when I saw the emails on your laptop. That's when I stopped wondering and started planning. You've known for 2 weeks? You've been pretending this whole time. The same way you've been pretending for 8 months. Turns out I'm better at it than you are. Marcus shook his head slowly. You're not the woman I thought you were. No, I agreed. I'm better. Now pack your things and get out of my apartment. You have 2 hours. It took Marcus closer to 3 hours to pack his essential belongings, moving through the apartment like a ghost, occasionally trying to start conversations that I shut down with polite firmness. Emma stayed the entire time, making sure he didn't take anything that wasn't his, making sure he didn't try to delete files or destroy evidence. By 11 o'clock, he was gone, and I was alone in the apartment that was finally, fully mine. Emma stayed a bit longer, helping me change the locks on the doors, helping me secure my computer and important documents, helping me process the enormity of what had just happened. How are you feeling? She asked as we sat on the couch with wine, the dinner dishes still on the table, evidence of the evening's carnage. Lighter, I said, and I meant it, like I've been carrying this weight for months without realizing it, and now it's gone, like I can finally breathe again. You were amazing tonight, Emma said. The way you controlled that whole situation, the evidence you'd gathered, the timing of everything. That was masterful. I had good teachers, I said, thinking of Derek and Lauren and my lawyer, all the people who'd helped me build my case and prepare my strategy. And I had good motivation. Nobody gets to treat me like that and walk away unscathed. What happens now? Now I wait to see what Marcus's company decides to do about the expense fraud. I wait to see if they decide to press charges or just fire him and demand restitution. I wait to see how Jessica's HR handles the fraternization violation. And I start rebuilding my life without him. Over the next few weeks, the consequences for Marcus and Jessica unfolded exactly as I'd predicted. Marcus was fired from his position for fraudulent expense reports and was required to pay back the $2,800 plus penalties. Jessica was also fired for violating the company's relationship disclosure policy, specifically for conducting an undisclosed romantic relationship with a coworker that created conflicts of interest and affected their professional judgment. Both of their professional reputations in the industry took serious hits, with former colleagues sharing the gossip and speculation about what had really happened. But the best part, the most satisfying consequence of all, came 2 weeks after Marcus moved out. Emma called me with an update she'd heard through mutual friends. Marcus and Jessica had tried to stay together, tried to build a real relationship now that everything was out in the open and there were no more obstacles keeping them apart. It lasted exactly 12 days before Jessica dumped him, claiming she couldn't be with someone who'd cost her her career, someone whose drama had destroyed her professional reputation. Marcus had tried to come back to me after that, showing up at my apartment late one night with flowers and apologies and promises that he'd learned his lesson, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he wanted to work things out. I'd listened to him through the door, my hand on the new deadbolt Emma and I had installed, and then I told him very calmly that he should leave before I called the police for harassment. He'd left. I hadn't heard from him since. 3 months after the confrontation dinner, I was living a completely different life. I'd redecorated the apartment, removing every trace of Marcus and replacing it with things that reflected my taste, my style, my personality. I'd reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the relationship, had started taking weekend trips to places I'd always wanted to go, had thrown myself into hobbies and interests that Marcus had never supported. I'd gotten a promotion at work, started therapy not because I was broken but because I was growing, and generally discovered that I was happier alone than I'd ever been in a relationship with someone who didn't value me. Emma came over for dinner one evening, and we sat in my newly decorated living room with wine and takeout, talking about everything and nothing. I saw Marcus the other day, she mentioned casually, at the grocery store. He looked rough, like he hasn't been sleeping well. That's not my problem, I said, and I meant it. He asked about you, asked how you were doing, if you were seeing anyone. What did you tell him? I told him you were happy, that you seemed lighter and freer than you'd been in years. He didn't like hearing that. I smiled. Good. He doesn't get to control my narrative anymore. He doesn't get to decide how I feel or what my life looks like. That's my decision now, and I'm choosing happiness. Have you forgiven him? Emma asked. I considered the question carefully. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I'm not angry anymore. I don't wish him ill. But I also don't have any desire to have him in my life in any capacity. He made his choices, he faced the consequences, and now we're both moving on with our separate lives. And Jessica? Jessica is apparently working at a company 3 states away, starting fresh where nobody knows about her pattern of relationship destruction. I hope she's learned something from all this, but honestly, I doubt it. Some people never learn. Some people just keep making the same mistakes over and over until there's nobody left to hurt. You don't sound bitter about that. I'm not bitter, I said honestly. I'm just realistic. Jessica is who she is, and Marcus is who he is, and nothing I do or say will change that. All I can control is my own life, my own choices, my own happiness. And I choose to be happy without them. 6 months after that Valentine's dinner that started everything, I was completely settled into my new life. The divorce of my relationship with Marcus was final, not legally since we'd never been married, but emotionally, psychologically, completely. I'd moved on in every way that mattered. I'd started dating again, casually, nothing serious, just enjoying getting to know new people without the weight of a failing relationship dragging me down. I'd traveled to Portugal like I'd always wanted to. Spent 2 weeks exploring ancient cities and eating incredible food and feeling more alive than I had in years. I'd strengthened my relationships with the people who actually mattered, the friends and family who'd supported me through everything, who'd never made me feel invisible or boring or less than enough. And I'd learned something crucial about myself, something I wished I'd learned years earlier. I'd learned that I didn't need a relationship to complete me, didn't need someone else's validation to feel valuable, didn't need to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. I'd learned that the right person would appreciate my strength, not feel threatened by it, would celebrate my independence, not try to diminish it, would choose me first, consistently, without hesitation or excuse. Marcus hadn't been that person. Maybe he never could have been. And Jessica had done me a favor really, though she'd never see it that way. She'd exposed the fundamental weakness in my relationship, had forced me to see what I'd been trying to ignore, had inadvertently pushed me toward a better life than I'd ever had with Marcus. So no, I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly sad anymore. I was just free, finally, completely free to be exactly who I was meant to be without apologizing for it or dimming my light to make someone else feel brighter. And that, I'd discovered, was worth more than any relationship built on lies and convenience and one person's willingness to be invisible. That was worth everything.